Yo, BJ Gaddour with the BJ Gaddour Podcast, and we have a legend in the house today. This guy is a strongman, powerlifter, a gentle giant, someone that I played football with in high school, someone I looked up to when I just started lifting weights, and this guy was a couple years ahead of me. And the example he set in terms of work ethic, discipline, character, they stick with me today. So it's actually, we haven't seen each other pretty much since we both graduated high school. But Eric Dawson, or as we know him, Ed, was a all-star lineman on both sides of the ball, football-wise, has records at my high school gym in terms of weightlifting, went on to play college football, but then kind of parlayed that into strongman powerlifting competitions. He has his own gym, tight end barbell. So we're going to talk today about a bunch of things, related to, strongman powerlifting, owning a gym. Obviously, he's a busy dad, so he has to find a way to manage the training, the business, and familial relationships. Not easy, all right? One of those alone is enough for a lifetime. And before I get into this too, because it's one of those things, football is one of those sports, especially, as you bridge the gap from grade to high school, or you're kind of going through adolescence, where, you can find yourself only a couple years difference. The time I'm thinking about right now is I was a freshman at University School of Milwaukee, and I was lining up on the left side of the line, and in front of me were the two biggest guys on the varsity squad. It was Eric Dawson, who's here today, and Robert Mielek. These guys each went, I think Mielek was 250, 275, and Ed is 6'5", 315. Naked. Okay, you put equipment on, we're talking 330. a big meal, maybe 350. And these guys drove me 35 yards down the field and put me on my back, and I looked up. They helped me up, and then we walked back to the line. And it was one of those moments where, some people would probably quit. It's this is not for me. It was humbling, and the nature of competition, man, you're going to find yourself on your back sometimes, especially when you're outsized, overwhelmed, and you can go a couple ways. You can quit, you can fold it in, you can get discouraged. I certainly was in the moment, but ultimately I kept going. I found my way to play some college football at a D3 level, but, became a fitness career from it. So I share that story because you're going to see how nice this guy is when we start talking, but this guy was a killer. This guy, legitimately, I'm talking overwhelmed me with his physicality and his strength and his size. But he was also just such a good dude, and it's great to have him on. So before we bring him in, he's backstage right now chilling with this beautiful beard. We'll talk about what products does he use, how often does he oil it, okay, because it is fantastic. A couple housekeeping issues. Like, share, subscribe. A simple like does a lot to help this get out to more good people like you. And lots of great content here coming out on YouTube. Free 7-day trial to thedailybj.com, where you get first access, ad-free access, and exclusive access to all of my content over the last 10 years, thousands of workouts. I think you guys would really enjoy supporting the content. So it means a lot to us. And stuff that comes on YouTube eventually here, it has ads, and it's already been used by our members for a while. So we'd love your support. All the gear I wear, sleevesoldseparately.com, hoodies, tank tops, joggers, you name it. The stuff you see me wearing in the videos, manufactured in downtown LA. My wife and I run the business. We'd love your support as well. And then stay tuned for my new protein powder and coffee blend. All right, let's bring the man, the myth, the legend in, Eric Ed Dawson.
Hi, BJ. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, my pleasure, man. It's been too long. Obviously, I've kind of heard about what you've been doing, and I've seen some videos on Instagram. I saw a video recently of you doing a 250-pound specialized grip exercise, I think at the Arnold Classic.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. Yeah.
But,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, but I haven't seen you since, really. And do you remember that story I just shared where you I'll never forget it, because again, I was on the receiving end of a totally humbling physical humiliation, but I don't know if you remember that particular play.
Ironically, I don't remember that play. I say ironically because the memory I have is being on the other side of that as a freshman, ironically. where my first introduction to that, Wes McKenzie and Scott Olson, same thing, just double team. And I went back and so I had that exact same experience. So it's funny that we both had the experience and the memory of being on that side and not necessarily on the dominating side, if you will.
So 15 to 17, that even a 1 or 2 year difference between like 14 to 18, it is like you can go from a boy to a man in a year. So it's a dangerous scenario, especially when it's like 2-on-1. But one thing I'll say, I didn't like a lot of that's probably not the best way to say it, but some of the older guys rubbed me the wrong way because, there's this mindset of hazing and like beating on the younger guys or making fun of them. And like, and you were never that way. In fact, you went out of your way to be helpful and to encourage and kind of lead by example. And again, like you can jest, but you like to kind of like go at like making fun of people in a group format. That was always a big turnoff to me, but you were not that guy. Robert Mielek in particular also was not. Like, I just wanted to ask you, like, why not? Like, because you're this huge guy. You could obviously have, taken advantage of your size and kind of like push people around and bully people, but like you were the exact opposite individual. And part of me thinks it's because of your dad, who was also very imposing. His beard was even better than yours, by the way. You're not even close. I think his was down to crotch level.
For sure. His was, there's no way I'll ever match up to what he had full like ZZ Top Santa Claus beard. Like there's no question. I never get close to that.
No, but look, it's still better than like 99.9% of the men who've ever graced the planet. But I've got a feeling your parents really instilled in you just that character that you really displayed out there on the football field and in the weight room.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the classic, lead by example or be the change you want to be, right? When I was young, like I didn't like it when the older, I didn't mind getting put on my back, right? Everybody has to be humbled. Everybody has to go through those growing pains. But candidly, just people that were just a-holes and a-holes for the sake because they had power over somebody else. I never liked that. So I knew that when I was in that position, I didn't want to be like that. It's pretty much as simple as that. And I also kind of looked at it as, obviously with a team, you are a team. Like, how are you going to be able to come together during tough moments if you haven't gelled, if you haven't built that brotherhood together, and you know that the other people you're playing with, you have each other's back. It's not a matter of like, I'm just going to keep beating this guy down, because in that moment, I know that person's going to give a little extra next to me.
Exactly. And again, you also know too that as a team, you go only as far as the weak links in the chain. And because we had such a small team, a lot of times we had to have freshmen and sophomores play up on varsity who weren't really physically ready yet, but just by necessity, we had to get bodies. So, I mean, guys like Adam Vanderveen, Drew Palin, who we've had on the show before, you've always like stood out to us as just a great leader and just someone that we really looked up to. And we appreciated the fact that, in some cases we were put in positions like, look, we're not ready to take on some of these responsibilities. But like I said, when you have people like you, captains of the team, that don't make you feel bad when you make a mistake or just, are realistic about what to expect from younger guys. That means a lot, man. And let me grab this one thing quick here too. We're still recording, but I don't keep a lot of things with me from my youth, if I'm being honest. Like some things are in boxes, but you remember that award, right?
I very much do, yeah.
Okay. And Ed and I both received this award, and the Ken Laird Award. I can read it to you. University School of Milwaukee, to the football player who best emulates the characteristics of Ken Laird: love of the game, unswerving loyalty, a winning spirit, empathy for his teammates, working for physical conditioning. You won this in 98 to 99. I won this 2001 to 2000, 2001. And I'm guessing that award meant a lot to you. I know it meant a lot to me. I love getting the yellow 1,000-pound club t-shirt. But that award to me it signified the most important thing when it comes to pursuits of anything, which is, your work ethic. And again, how that affects the people around you. And you were absolutely someone who emulated that, and I saw that, and so what did that award mean to you, and how is that? Because it's funny, a lot of these things that happen in that pivotal period in high school, they kind of become like key identifiers in us as adults as we get older. So I know it was impactful for me. Obviously, we both had the same mentor and Coach Donald Forty, who both kind of, took us under his wing and really pushed us to find out the best we could be in the weight room, in and out of the weight room, frankly, as men. So I just wanted to bring that up because it's by my boombox, and it's one of the only things I've kept with me over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. That award did mean a lot. I still have mine as well. Just because it was less about there was an aspect of excellence on the field, but it was more just about everything that it took to be successful that people don't see. Right. The classic definition of a character is everything that you do that people don't see. Right. The things that you do that go unseen that end up producing the result of the person you see in front of you. Right. So that's a big part of that. And that like you said, that stuck with me. Like I said, I still have mine to this day, more than 20 years later. And I try to still emulate a lot of those things in my life every single day. And as you mentioned earlier, a lot of that was just instilled by my parents from a young age. And I just try to continue to do that to this day, to be honest.
We obviously both got into fitness, both got into coaching in our own ways. And we had you and I were blessed with the ultimate coach. I mean, I talk about him whenever I can. And for decades now, I've introduced most videos with an homage to Coach Donald Forty, who, again, just a reminder, not a big guy, maybe 5'6", 5'7", but he's this thick Italian tank, a record-breaking powerlifter in the state of Wisconsin, and legitimately a true molder of men in the way that I think we all could strive to be. Never cursed on the field or at his players. Always, he could get fired up.
Oh yeah.
You got him I got him a little more mild mannered. I got him right when he was still he would lose it, but not in a way that would be degrading to people. But he had some fire in him. And then obviously as you get older, you wind down. But man, I think about him every day in some way, and he identified in me, pulled me into the weight room when I was 14. Taught me how to do the 4 lifts, and I everything I've done since is kind of that's the start of a new life for me. Talk to me about the impact he had in your life, and there's a moment or just a series of events that kind of got you, because look, we both I grew up overweight. We both were these bigger guys at a school of tiny people, thin people, and I guess you'd call us the quote unquote fat guys growing up, and lifting really kind of allowed us to just break out of a shell and kind of prove to ourselves we couldn't be defined by other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke about this before with his impact. I would say outside of my father and grandfathers, he's the man in my life who's had a bigger impact than anybody else to this day. But like you said, when I also was introduced to him when I was 14, was taught how to lift. I struggled in school a lot, so certainly early on. So having success in the weight room and on the athletic field helped build that confidence that would go forward and help translate to other aspects of my life. So without that, I don't know that I would have had that level of success elsewhere. Or candidly, just having a coach that taught us how to do things the right way and demanded it, and would not allow us to add more weight to the bar without having proper form, right? That was something that, obviously, as you know, right, 14 to 17-year-old kids, 18-year-old kids, they just want to add, everybody does, but especially at that age, it's just all about how quickly can I add more weight, right? And he was just such a stickler about making sure we did things the right way. And then even beyond form, it was just learning how to warm up properly, right? Learning to stay conditioned, learning to do all of those things that encompass being a good, both in the weight room and an athlete on the field itself. So a huge credit to to Coach 40 for being so demanding in those sessions all those years when we were both in our formative years.
And you know what? I'm going to give you the opportunity here to tell these people how much of an idiot I was in the weight room. Because like what you just described, like I wanted to put the stack to the bottom and do tricep push downs with my entire body weight. Because again, like that was the mindset of just like everyday PR. And it's cost me to this day. Like I'm still working on injuries and stuff like that. But I'm going to give you the opportunity because again, like a lot of guys made fun of me. You instead came over and said, like, let's bump the weight down a little bit. You can get a better effect with like 150 less pounds on the tricep push down. Like again, that mentality. This is an assistive exercise. But I wanted to bring that up too, because again, like it's that mentality.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not going to bury you too much. The way I look at it in terms of like when I'm working with an athlete nowadays, I will always take somebody who's willing to work their ass off over somebody who I have to kind of pull their teeth a little or pull them along and to kind of get them to work hard. It's easier, I think, to find somebody who's got that awesome work ethic and to kind of refine that and kind of explain why, that classic kind of overtraining will ultimately end up leading to plateaus as well as injury. So yeah, I do remember like when we had protocols of like, all right, it's 3x5 and BJ, I looked over and I'm like, we're all done. We've been done for a little bit. And I see BJ doing like sets of 10. And I realized like, you're basically doing like German volume training, like 10x10, right? When we're all doing, right. So like when we're all doing 3x5 and again, I get it, right? Like it works until it doesn't work. But, like I said, I'd always take somebody who's willing to work over somebody who isn't. Yeah.
100%. Let's get into your origin story, man. Like, talk to me about, obviously we just talked about like the mentor and Coach 40, but like, what has always attracted you to strength and conditioning, and why did you decide to make it a career?
That's a good question. I don't know if there was like a specific point in my life in which I knew that that's what I wanted to do, or what drew me to it initially, even before getting properly trained by Coach 40 with a barbell. Like growing up, I would go out into our backyard, and our family has a rock quarry and sand and gravel business. So like I grew up going there, and like I remember, literally lifting stones and boulders just to see if I could lift them. And if we go back even further, I've actually had 2 hernia operations, one when I was 6 and one when I was 8 years old. Both times, ironically, trying to lift something too heavy. So wow. I don't remember what was in my brain at that point in my life, when I was 6 or 8 years old, but I've just always been drawn to just lifting something heavy, right? So like in retrospect, you realize like where I'm at now, it's kind of funny that's kind of the origin story. If you back up that far, that I had actually, without knowing, obviously I was 6 years old and 8 years old, that I had hurt myself, but in the pursuit of trying to lift something very heavy.
And you grew up during the era of American Gladiators at its best, and also The World's Strongest Man. Like both of those shows, like imprinted on me for life. But like The World's Strongest Man, like no knock to CrossFit. I mean, maybe not to CrossFit, but like I would watch and rewatch The World's Strongest Men. Like it never got old to me. I always thought it was so entertaining, way more entertaining, frankly, than the CrossFit games, if I'm being honest, just because the events were shorter, and it was just such a clear, like, if you're not really into fitness, it's hard to understand like what's going on in CrossFit, like how hard it is to get all those skills and all that repetition. And it's more like about stamina and endurance in a lot of cases, but like, it's really crystal clear what's going on there in these strongman events. You either lift it or you don't, or you take this object, you move it over there as fast as you can. Like those events, like I'm thinking like the guy like Magnus Magnuson, or, just Magnus Samuelson, these crazy like Viking style guys. I'm assuming you got real into that as a kid too. Am I wrong?
No, you're dead on with that. That is something, I think, honestly, if anybody around our age, and maybe even nowadays still, it probably happens, but certainly back then, I was drawn to that. I had always loved watching those. always interested in that. And that's kind of, if we want to fast forward, like that's how I eventually got into that after football. But a big part of why I think people enjoy it so much than they have for decades is it's two things. One, it's people doing something that they're pushing themselves to the limit and lifting something or doing something that we're not sure if most humans could do, right? And I think to your point, like I'm not going to sit here and bash like other types of training or competitions or things like that. But I think what has ultimately drawn people to the sport of strongman is you're like, this is something that I know I couldn't do. I can't wrap my mind around that. And this person's doing it at an extremely high level, right? So there's that coupled with the visual appeal, right? So I think what strongman has over, say, for example, like a sport like powerlifting, again, not knocking it. There's extremely strong people that are impressive in the sport of powerlifting, but from a visual aspect, for people that don't understand any of the strength sports, what strongman has over them is the visual appeal, right? So I always joke and say like, so one of the things we'll do is like a yoke carry, right? So it's a bar across your back and there's two uprights that have weights on them. So you can load some plates onto there, right? And walk with it. And you could probably load up to 1,000 pounds, 1,200 pounds, right? And your average person's like, okay, they don't know the difference between something that weighs 300 pounds and something that weighs 1,200 pounds if just plates are added to it. But if all of a sudden I strap two 300-pound refrigerators to the side, right, which is actually less weight, right, than a bunch of plates, they're like, oh my God, this guy is running with two refrigerators on his back, right? Yeah. So the visual appeal has always been there for strongman. And that's what, it's still to this day something that is both physically demanding and something that only the 1% of the 1% of the population can do, but also, like I said, that visual appeal and relating to things in their life, right? Like literally pulling an airplane by themselves, or lifting concrete stones up onto a platform that don't have handles. And so from that aspect of it, that's why I said that's what's always drawn me to the sport. That's what I know has drawn a lot of people to the sport.
It was really like it was a strength Olympics. Yeah. And it was perfect TV, like you said. Planes, cars, pillars, throwing stones, carrying stones. I think my favorite, the one I remember the most, like it was like, wow, this guy's got it all. And I'm old, so I may mess up this guy's name. Mariusz Pudzianowski.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Like, dude, I think he was my favorite, at least at the time. And again, I've kind of checked out on it since I got out of football because, life gets in the way. And the people I was interested in working with or that I was working with, they didn't want to become strongmen. It was like, frankly, a lot of perimenopausal women when I got into the personal training game, and getting bigger was not their goal. So, but like he was jacked, he was ripped, he was strong, he was conditioned, he had great footwork, no body fat. Obviously, there was some pharmaceutical assistance, I'm assuming, going on there, but like, to me, like he was the guy, like, wow, this guy has put it all together, and he's still like, he can be the leanest, biggest, strongest guy out there. Like he was truly like in the bigger, faster, stronger program that we were put on, like in high school, like this was the guy, like that, the blend of all of it. Do you have a guy that, well, first of all, obviously you remember him, but like any particular strongman like stand out that you were like, wow, this is the guy?
I would say from my youth, watching Magnus for Magnuson, right?
Yes, that's the one.
I've been fortunate enough to meet him a bunch of times. He's refed a couple of competitions I've done. So that's been kind of a cool kind of full circle thing. Magnus Samuelsson, another guy. So Magnus for Magnuson's from Iceland. Magnus Samuelsson's from Sweden. Those are probably two of the guys that growing up, I was drawn to the most. Magnus for Magnuson just because of one, excellence, right? He won World's Strongest Man 4 times, but was definitely a thinking man's strongman, right? Like while he was obviously extremely strong, one of the things that gave him an edge was his ability to figure out events on the fly and adapt really, really quickly. So that's something that I had always admired and tried to do myself. And then Magnus Samuelsson, just because he ends up, he was on the taller side. I want to say he's like 6'6" or so, which nowadays in strongman isn't that tall. Like there's guys even taller than him. But being on the taller side and having by percentage a weaker deadlift, which is kind of, I'm in that same boat. I've been drawn to him as well. But he still was able to win because he was so good at so many other things and did just enough with the stuff that he wasn't as good at to mitigate some of those losses.
So let's talk about your lifting resume. So obviously you were a standout high school football player. You played at North Dakota State. You want to talk about like just basic, because obviously it started with powerlifting, obviously casual strongman at home or at the quarry, but just, numbers you've reached on the main lifts, and then, what encouraged you to kind of then go into the strongman route, and kind of like, I want to talk about it all, like the training for it, strengths, weaknesses, the mindset, like you said, there's tactical as well, right? And then sometimes like being tall is an advantage, like when you're doing the fingers, and then it's a big disadvantage when we're talking about things like, deep squatting or picking up stones off the ground where like, someone who's squattier, right? So there is like, okay, I might have to lose this event, but if at least I get third here, and then I definitely gotta win this event. It's so entertaining to me. So let's go through some numbers and what you've achieved, and then I want to get like a glimpse of what it's like to be a strong man, the events, and what your training and diet look like for that.
Sure. So I guess just to touch on real briefly how I got into it was after playing football in college, after being out of college, I was just lifting at a commercial gym. Was just kind of for a couple of years, and just kind of like, what is this? What I want to do with the rest of my life? I was like, I kind of need something to keep the competitive juices flowing a little bit. I was working at a Bally Total Fitness at the time, and one of my coworkers, I'd always mentioned, I was like, I loved watching strongman. I was like, I'd really like to learn how to do that. And one of my coworkers at the time was like, hey, there's a gym like 20 minutes from here that teaches people how to do that stuff. And at that time, they were really one of the only places, certainly in this region of the country, that was open to the public that would teach you how to do something like that. So I went over there, and as they say, the rest is history. I was bitten pretty early with the bug, and I love it. And I haven't stopped since. And that's been over 15 years ago at this point. So that's kind of how I got into it. I did my first competition after a couple of months of training. I didn't know if I was ready, but I had hired somebody that I had trusted, and he said, all right, you got a good strong base. We'll work on the technique, which is a huge aspect of the sport. Obviously, as the name would suggest, being strong is extremely important, but I think an often overlooked aspect for a lot of competitors is the skill level it takes, the technique work it takes with all the varied events. Because unlike powerlifting, where it's squat, bench, deadlift, or Olympic lifting, where it's snatch and clean and press, where you're always doing the same things under the same conditions, strongman, there are 50 plus events that you could be competing in, right? And then variations on those. I mean, so all of those, you have to kind of learn and be able to, like I said earlier, adapt on the fly with pieces of equipment that aren't standardized. That's another aspect of the sport that you have to be adaptable and learn to be able to think on your feet. Because I've had people that, with the barbell, like way stronger than me, right? No question about it. But I've been able to beat them in the sport because I've been able to figure out the best way or the most efficient way to lift something, especially if it's something that's changed on the fly, which has also happened. I've done contests where I've flown overseas, done a contest, and they changed 3 of the 6 events completely. So imagine if you're like, all right, I'm going to go over here. We're going to play a football game, but just kidding. We're going to take the wide receivers off the field, and we're going to put on somebody who has a tennis racket, right? You're like, what is this sport now, right? Like, it's totally, I did not train for this at all. Now, that's not the best analogy, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Like, You train for something, and then all of a sudden you're like, just kidding. You're not doing that at all. You're doing this instead.
100%. And so they get an idea too of just like how like, what are the, like, what's your best bench, squat, deadlift, if you will, or clean? And then what would that compare? Like, is some people wonder, if they're wondering, like, what would it take? Because maybe they're thinking, I got to start with barbells to get an idea of like, I got to hit some barbell standards, and then I can kind of move into strongman. Or do you recommend just getting into strongman right away, simultaneously with the powerlifting? But just to give people an idea of like, and like you said, sometimes it doesn't necessarily translate. Like, as a football player, some of the best guys I played with high school and college were not good in the weight room.
Yeah.
You know, they just happen to be good, highly skilled football players that had a nose for the ball, if you will. So talk to us about that, because again, those numbers are to the average person probably massive, but give them an idea of what it takes.
Sure. So I'll just start off with my weakest event of all of them, deadlift. My best deadlift, raw deadlift from the floor is 725. Which, to put in perspective, like where my other numbers have lined up, like that number should probably be mid 800s or higher, right? With how well I can do with a lot of the other events in strongman. So that's where, like I said, I give up a lot of points in a lot of competitions there on the deadlift. Best squat, 700 as well. I don't do a ton of bench pressing, to be honest with you. I do more floor pressing, a lot of overhead pressing for strongman, because generally there aren't horizontal presses in the sport. So anytime I press horizontally, I usually am doing like an axle floor press to help supplement my overhead work. My best log overhead is 400. My best axle clean and press overhead, I've done out of the full clean and press. My best is 400, I think 405 on that. I've done out of a rack without cleaning it, 395 for 5. I'm trying to think of what else as far as like barbell work. That's pretty much. And then like in the sport of strongman stuff, I've done an Atlas Stone 500 reps or 500 pounds for 2 reps. Done 1,100 pound yoke walks or runs for 60 feet. I've done farmers walks with 440 pounds per hand. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like there's other random stuff. Done a 500 pound Husafel carry. Yeah.
And then what were your best numbers? Just to give people the growth from like high school, college to today. Because again, a lot of people think you can't get stronger, after you're out of college, or like a lot of the mindset in professional athletes is, let me just maintain my strength and not get injured once I go professional or get kind of mid-20s and later. But how much of the gains have occurred in the last like 2 decades as an adult?
A good amount. I mean, I obviously, like I said, coming up with Coach 40, like we had a good base. I can't remember off the top of my head. I know I benched over 3 plates in high school, squatted over 5, deadlifted over 5. Power clean, I think I was at like 285. So that was all in high school. In college, we didn't deadlift. We didn't do a ton of bench. We did some squatting. We did a lot of Olympic lifting, a lot of cleans. That's also where a lot of my back problems had started as well, just before that, and they were kind of exacerbated throughout college. And then that's kind of been a theme throughout my entire career. Kind of part of the reason why my deadlift hasn't been the same or hasn't been up to par is just dealing with a back injury that's pretty much gone on for about 25 years. I've pretty much more or less got it under wraps now. Part of it is just being intelligent with not pushing and not being stupid about pushing too hard, especially if I know the signs that are coming when I know that would potentially have a setback.
Lumbar spine, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so it's interesting. What I found over time was, I mean, I had literally seen several doctors over the years from when I was in high school through college. I was put in not a full body cast, but basically a brace from just below my sternum to my hips, that because they thought my spine hadn't fused together. Then the next doctor was like, no, that's not the case at all. You have weak abs. So I was doing like an extra, on top of all the training for college football, an extra hour's worth of like ab work. That really wasn't the case. And really just honestly through a lot of self-guided learning, I learned that it ended up being a lot of dysfunction from my hips and from my glutes that were causing that back to kind of that lock up. So it's still to this day, I have to be conscious of when I train. I'm doing a lot of those smaller accessory work on the glutes, on the adductors, to help complement that, so that my back doesn't take too much strain.
And then obviously the question from the average layman is like, why would you, if you have back pain, why would you do these things that can destroy your back? And without even with perfect technique, when you're competing with loads like this, anything can happen, right?
Yeah, correct. So to answer that question, ironically, all of that stuff actually made my back feel better, except for deadlifting, right?
Okay.
That was the weird thing. It's like I'd come out of like the stone lifting sessions, the Atlas stone lifting sessions, and I'd walk away with less back pain than I did going into it. And don't get me wrong, if it was something where it was just a truly like chronic, where every single day I got out of bed and I was in pain, I don't know that I would have done that. But that wasn't the case. It was more like, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back situation, right? But like I said, it really was a matter of the only thing, and still pretty much to this day, the only thing that I have any kind of setback with my back is deadlifting. And that, with my coach, we've worked on just mitigating not pulling heavy as frequently as somebody without that issue would be, and just kind of learning to like, all right, we're going to peak for this specific competition, so we're only going to deadlift heavy a certain amount of times leading up to it, and just work on sub-maximal weight and just really drill home form. So that way, when it's time to go, the movement pattern's right, and we're able to go.
I've heard about a lot of advanced lifters as they're getting older. They deadlift heavy like once every 2 to 4 weeks, just to maintain the stimulus. Like you said, it is a lot of like power speed work, sub-maximal, and then like a lot of there's a lot of accessory movements you can do to build your deadlift without necessarily deadlifting, right? So obviously you're a master of the craft in terms of like finding the workarounds to stay in the game, right? I mean, that's really what this is all about. Because you're definitely over 40. What do you know? 42, 43?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So what, like, are you noticing, has it been even harder over 40, or are you had like, sometimes you have so many injuries when you're coming up that like turning 40 isn't a big deal, but have you noticed like a new wall that you started to hit, or a new amount of extra work you have to do on the outside of a session to get ready for the next session? Like, where you at right now as an over 40 competitive strongman?
It's a good question. It's going to sound weird. I actually feel better now at 42, 42 than I did at 27, right? Now, part of that is due to being a lot more intelligent with my training, right? When I first got into strongman, and I don't think I was stupid for doing it. I think that's what was needed at the time, and that's not what's needed now. I trained a lot. I trained a lot more. It was a matter of more is better, right? To a point. I mean, never to a point of injury, but just as I've aged, I've with my coach, we've learned to manage fatigue a lot better, right? So I'm not pushing hard, super hard for 3 hours a day, 4 to 5 days a week like I was at one point, right? Now my sessions are a lot more targeted. We're going to do some more, what people would consider more of a conditioning day. We're gonna build in a couple of accessory days where I'm getting my heart rate up and I'm working for maybe 60 to 75 minutes. And then as far as the heavier lifting goes, that's only going to be probably once or twice a week. As I get closer to a contest, that's going to bump up a little bit in terms of the amount of weight and the intensity with that. But just not pushing hard, not literally jamming in the accelerator the entire time has been a big part of it. So that coupled with, making sure I stay on my mobility, making sure I stay on my recovery, getting proper sleep every single night, staying hydrated, proper nutrition, the fuel, all that stuff. That's also, like I said, I feel actually, for the most part, better now at 42 than I did at 27. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, yeah, I'm probably a little slower than I was, no question about it, right? Like, but that's what's able to kind of help me, as I like to call it, reduce my rate of decay.
100%.
Right? Like, that's really what I'm trying to do, right? Like, I'm looking like we all have a rate of decay right now. If we can avoid that drop off, if mine looks more like this than this, I'm happy, right? I know it's going to go down, right? Like, I know, especially, and I don't have any problem talking about this, but like, I'm a lifetime natural athlete, right? Like, that's in this sport, that's not always super common. So I understand that, like, I'm probably not going to be putting up bigger and bigger numbers as I get older, especially given my experience level in the sport, right? If it was somebody who got into it at 40, yeah, you could get stronger if you were brand new, because when you're new to something, you're learning, you're getting stronger even as you're older. But with the amount of years I've put in, there's generally I'm not most likely hitting all-time PRs at this stage in my life.
But you can always, as you get older, improve conditioning and mobility.
For sure.
There's absolutely a strength and power plateau. For some people, it's 25 to 30. I think the nature of this odd object and just the it's kind of like a renaissance of athleticism, right? You need it all.
Yeah.
To pick up a stone off the ground and then do it repetitively. You're doing it's a mix of just all out anaerobic and even some aerobic as well. So that's kind of where the shift goes, right? It's like, okay, now I'm going to keep pushing my strength where I can and try to get better technique to squeeze out poundage where I can. But, you know, that piece is already kind of like, and building the ultimate strongman, like the strength base is probably where it is. And now you're just finding whatever small cracks you can fill, right? In your whole little overall arsenal.
100%. I mean, that's really that in terms of the sport of strongman, you can tell when people either haven't trained heavy enough, or most likely it's the opposite. It's they've trained super heavy, but they have not worked on anything in terms of getting their heart rate up, any kind of conditioning, because they'll be really strong for the first rep or two, and then we'll just fall off a cliff. Or when we do something where we're going to have to pick up a keg, run it down, run back, pick up a sandbag, run it down, run back. Like halfway through that, they're just on their hands and knees, right? Just trying to catch their breath. Meanwhile, the people that have been putting in that work are going, and don't get me wrong, it's not as if we're like at the end of it, but we're able to do that and recover pretty quickly, right? And that's something that's definitely given me an advantage, because I'm sitting around like 365. But a lot of times, and now the sport's kind of getting smart to this in the last handful of years, but for a number of years, I was able to recover a lot quicker than guys who were 230, 250 pounds, because I would put in that work on the conditioning side of things and could recover a lot quicker.
I'm assuming that like that seems to have been like a huge advantage. Like, because again, like I remember first seeing Mariusz Pudzianowski, and it's like, wow, because all the other guys like they were huge. You know what I mean? Like, and they could still do the 60-second like all out events, but like not at the pace right now with the footwork. So it's, as it always is, the next generation is always better. They're more skilled, they're more conditioned, they're stronger, they eat better, they recover better. What does it take? You've always been a big guy, but like, I think you were like 30 pounds less in high school as a senior. If I'm like, you were like 6'5", 315, right?
Yeah, 315, 325, somewhere in that range. Yeah. So,
but then you become an adult, and so it's not like unreasonable to become like 350 plus to 365 at this point. It's 6'5". Talk to us about like the diet piece of this to maintain the body mass required to move these insane loads, and then also just to recover from the exercise. Like what's that look like, and maybe how has that changed as you've gotten older?
Sure. As broad strokes, as far as meals, obviously, like with most strength athletes and most people, like prioritizing protein, lean protein sources. So chicken, turkey. I like lean ground beef, bison, stuff like that. We'll throw in fish and stuff at dinner as well. Carbohydrate source, because obviously you need carbohydrates when you're doing, something like this for the demands of the sport. For the most part, I try to get the majority of those before and after training sessions, specifically like heavier training sessions. And then on the bookends of the day, the morning, because I train midday just based on my schedule. So the bookends of the day, I try to keep lower carb and higher fat. So breakfast is more protein and fat related, and middle of the day are more carbohydrate and protein. So that's pretty much like broad strokes. That's what it looks like. And then vegetables throughout the day. They're pretty much most meals, most days, I'm getting at least one source of vegetable in there, one source of green vegetable a lot of times, keeping the fiber in. So that's been a big part of it as well. That's been helpful.
So how many meals a day on average? And also, I don't know, to differentiate between meal and snack. And then what are the calorie totals? Because again, like people don't understand the mass gain or strength. I'm assuming you're at like 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day.
That's a pretty accurate assessment. Yeah. I'm at a point now where I don't track super specifically down to the exact calorie, but I'd say you're right in that ballpark. Yeah, it's usually about 3 to 4 meals per day. Again, depending on my schedule, because again, life happens. Like I'm fortunate enough I can do this, but that's not my full-time job, right? Like I run a gym. I've got 2 kids. I've got other responsibilities. Like my life isn't solely training, eating, recovering, right, and repeating. So a snack may be, a piece of fruit and protein, 15 grams of protein, right? So something like that. I'll get that. Like that's something I can do while I'm driving to go get my girls from school. So I'll mix in something like that once or twice a day as well.
And then you'll just in big ass meals, like we're talking big plates.
Yeah. Generally tend to be on the bigger portion size, just because again, my work schedule and stuff like that. Like, I'm not breaking it up into like I'm not breaking up those 5,000 to 6,000 calories into like 8 meals, just because it's just not as sustainable for my schedule. Right. I'm not going to tell clients, all right, just give me 15 minutes. Let me go scarf down this meat. Right. Like, so I have to kind of pick and choose between, when I'm training people, when I'm doing other stuff. Yeah.
It's expensive. I mean, so you must be like, so how are you eating 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day with children and a family in this economy and with this inflation on food prices? Like, are you like, you scouring the bargains, coupons? Are you doing like a freezer, getting a bunch of stuff in freezer at a farm and bringing it back? Like, because I'm looking to take some notes here.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing real quick, the first time Angel, my wife, and I moved in together, we went to the grocery store together, and she cried and called my mom because she was like, I don't know how we're going to do this, right? We spent over $300 on groceries, right? She was like, she was in college, and she was like, I'm used to spending $50, and that lasts me, a week or more, right? And now our first grocery trip was $300 and like going through it. So that's pretty much just been the norm for me most of my life. But to answer your question, carbohydrates are obviously pretty cheap. Rice, sweet potatoes. A lot of vegetables are on the cheaper side. Proteins are obviously where things get expensive. Eggs have kind of come up in the last few years, but those are still kind of like per gram of protein, not too bad price wise. As far as the other stuff goes, Costco, right, buying in bulk, and then beyond that, we do have a deep freeze. I try to bargain and hunt. Like I don't know if this is just the East Coast or Midwest thing, but Wegmans, a grocery store. What I'll do is when I find I'll find stuff, because we have a big deep freeze. They'll mark stuff down they'll mark it down like 40 to sometimes 50% proteins, because it's stuff that they need to sell within the next 24 to 48 hours. I'll grab all of those, right? So I'll grab maybe like 20 to 30 chicken breasts at a time that are all marked down to go, and I'll literally just throw them in the freezer. Like I know that they'll be good, so when I'm ready, like I've got now chicken breast at 40 to 50% off, which is obviously not normal. When I go to Costco, I'll do stuff like if I'm doing steak, they have the already cut steaks. Then a cheaper price is when you see them in the vacuum sealed things, the like big piece that they're cutting it off of. And then what most people don't know is they actually have case price, which if you're willing to buy a case, so those vacuum sealed larger cuts, they actually have like between 4 and 6 of those in a case, in a cardboard case. If you buy that, it drops it, again, depending on what you're buying, another $1 or $2 per pound. So again, you're spending a good amount in one chunk, but I spend a half a day butchering it up, vacuum sealing it, throwing it in the freezer, and now all of a sudden I've got protein for a couple of months because of that.
Business. It's literally a business. I mean, you've got the business of Strongman. I mean, you've got the meal prep. You got to gather the proteins. You got to. It's. I bet they love you at checkout.
Ironically, it's funny. My wife always jokes, and she's like, how are you on a first name basis with so many people at Costco? Right now, part of it is obviously my size, right? Like I stick out, right? Just my height and size in general. But part of it is like, I'm friendly. I talk to people. I literally talk to the butcher manager. I'm like, all right, what's on case price today? What are we doing? So just kind of building those relationships, kind of understanding if I can just kind of ask those questions. All right, this is something that we sell. If you do this, you can actually save a little bit more money. Or this is, here's a good lean cut of beef that maybe I wasn't aware of, right, that they have. So just honestly asking. I know, and it's as simple as that.
So obviously we're 4 years post, or whatever you want to call it, post, mid, or the pandemic situation, half the industry left. And now the average for new people in fitness is you're out of the industry in 6 months. You're still in the game. You're still in business. How is your gym? And I looked at your Instagram too. It looks like you do a lot of like events. You host certifications. What is the nature of the gym business, and how is it different post-pandemic?
That's a great question. Ironically, we've never been busier than coming out of the pandemic. And I think part of that was two reasons. I think the members we've always had amazing members. I truly believe that. Like the culture that we set up here, people really buy into it. They enjoy it. They wanna see this place successful. So they're referring friends. They are protective of the culture here as well. So all those people came back, and more people that realized they didn't want to go to a big commercial gym anymore. They're like, I just don't want to go to a big place like that. So having a smaller facility like mine, I'm just about I'm a little under 5,000 square feet. So not tiny, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, but I'm also not a Globo gym that's 20, 30, 100,000 square feet or more. So having that personal feel and connecting with people on a personal basis, for the most part, I'm pretty sure I'm pretty good at remembering every single person's name who walks in the door and making that personal connection with them, so they know that they are part of the community, and they're not just something randomly, some person randomly doing, leg curls in the back, right? Connecting with people on a human level. It sounds obviously very cliche, but it's been just a part of day one, what I've wanted to establish the culture. And honestly, going back to what Coach 40 is, Coach 40 wasn't sitting in his office. Right now, it's a little different when you're working with high schoolers. It's not like he couldn't sit in his office, but he wasn't just sitting in his office while everybody was out lifting. He was interacting, encouraging, asking people how they're doing. So just building that same culture here. And really just I built a place that I wanted to lift in, that people are really get after it. So you come here and you're going to have a facility where people around you are getting after their goals, whether that goal is to get a little leaner, whether that goal is to learn how to lift with a barbell for the first time, whether that goal is to squat 800 pounds in the upcoming powerlifting meet that they have. We have people from all over the spectrum, and the awesome part of it is that it's a really inclusive community where I never wanted a multi-tier system where you're like, all right, well, that's the really strong guy, so everybody has to kind of be reverential to that person, right? The person who's learning a kettlebell swing for the first time, to me, is every bit as important as the person who's deadlifting 900 pounds, right? And I think a lot of people really appreciate that and buy into that. And yeah.
Again, it's one of those things. It's, sometimes you would think it can be counterintuitive. You would think during tough times, a more specialized or boutique or, type of approach might not resonate as much. But the reality is sometimes the general stuff is less appealing during the tough times. And people that are because, the stuff you're doing, you're a different type of cat.
Definitely.
Going out there and getting 100 pounds of protein at case price and, dedicating 3+ hours a day to your overall training or practice, I'm assuming. It's at least 3-hour commitment a day, I'm assuming. Mobility, working out, all the stuff you do. I'm right? How many hours a day are you putting into this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, if you really think about all the stuff that's outside of the actual lifting, the actual lifting per session for me, like I said, has gone down just because I've been able to be a lot more intelligent about it and not needing to do as long as sessions. But you're probably not too far off in terms of mobility work and everything else related to recovery that goes into training. You're probably looking at like you said, about close to 3 hours a day.
So you're a different type of cat. And sometimes, again, the famous quote is tough times make hard men. And sometimes these tough times that they bring out, someone's they're really struggling. What can I control?
Yeah.
My effort. I need an outlet. So everything around me sucks. But when I go into this gym, it's a focus on getting better, pushing myself, and then taking advantage of that synergistic feel with other people like you in that gym. And then obviously they've got a great leader, a guy who's doing it at the highest level. And not that all your clients are strong men or strong women, but let me go there too. How many women have gotten involved in wanting to get into the strongman stuff as well that you've worked with?
A good amount, to be honest with you. I'd have to look at the actual numbers, but in terms of like my member base, it's probably either like a 50-50 split or maybe like 60-40 towards men. So that's definitely something a lot of people would, from the outside, they probably think, oh, that place must just be like a bunch of guys who look like me, right? And further from the truth, right? Like, yes, there are big, strong men that are going after, powerlifting and strongman and other things, but we also have women that are competing in those sports at a very high level. We have men and women that, like I said, they are in their 50s, 60s. Even a couple of coaches here have some clients in their early 70s that are just wanting to be in an environment that isn't a commercial gym. They want to learn how to lift a barbell, to be strong, right? Obviously, bone density, working on that side of the stuff. So those two things are happening within 15 feet of each other, right? Legitimately, like somebody who's squatting 700 pounds and a 70-year-old woman who's deadlifting 65 pounds, right, to work on her bone density, right? So, and the awesome part about it is neither one of them is weird, right? Like they both are just totally normal, happening simultaneously.
I love that, man. Oh, that's probably the big appeal of it too, is that you get to bump shoulders with people you'd never bump shoulders with, maybe on the outside. But there's that, again, that's the beauty of fitness, man. It really does bring people together. And whether we have the same or different goals, everyone's coming to get better. And again, everyone's looking for a safe space. Like that third place that maybe we used to have like 10 to 20 years ago isn't really there anymore. People aren't really looking. Again, a lot of that's where the pandemic like hurt a lot of things, right? Because people they don't want like you to come and use the bathroom.
Yeah.
And hope that you stick around to like buy something, right?
Yeah.
And we've all gotten, we've all been affected by the antisocial nature that was required, like staying away from each other and covering ourselves up and getting so insulated, right? And kind of in our own bubbles. So I'm sure your gym is really, I'm sure you've created an amazing culture and really a safe third space for people that, they know whenever they come in there's no bullshit, except you can bullshit, but there's no bullshit. You get to work and you have fun and you collectively get better.
For sure. Yeah. And the big part of it is just, like I said, it's a little cliche, but that community aspect of it, which is what I think keeps people coming through difficult times. Maybe they're like, don't really want to go to the gym today, but they know their friends or other people that they know are going to be there. Right. That community, like we'll host events where I'll do like game nights, or play like board games, or I'll do stuff where I'll order a UFC fight and we'll all just kind of hang and do that. Or I do barbecues at the house, and I've done cookouts here at the gym, just building stuff. Because for a lot of people, like you said, they may not, especially in this area where it tends to be a little more transient, just based on all the colleges. People may not, if they're not from this area, they're like, I don't really know anybody outside of work, right? So like, if I kind of have that group of friends or the quote unquote family at the gym, I know that's true for a lot of people here. So having stuff like that to kind of anchor them here and having events and things like that will help them stay committed long term, right? Because obviously we all reach points mentally, physically, where we're like, I just don't know if I want to still do this, but knowing that somebody else is going to be there and knowing somebody else will notice if you're not there is an important aspect of it, I think.
Oh, for sure, man. That's no matter how tough you are, if you don't have built-in support and accountability, like you said, you're going to have those, it's a roller coaster. You're going to have those tough moments on the low end of that ride where it's like you want to quit or you don't feel up to do what you want to do that day. And look, I'll tell you flat out, like, I haven't done anything competitive since college. I did some natural bodybuilding, but for me to do the stuff I do in day out, like, yeah, I guess the accountability is being on camera, having to look a certain way, make money, try to inspire people, stuff like that. But having something to be competitive in, it does make you get up more for a session. It just, so what I'm trying to say is, like, I've developed like an insane level of willpower and discipline because I train alone. I'm not training for anything.
Yeah.
And hearing you talk, it's like, yeah, I guess. And part of why I don't compete is because if I get injured, I can't do what I do. Like I can't video. So, but like you have like a caged beast here that just like I've just been normalized, bro. Like I'm just trying to stay in shape, and but just talking with you makes me want to just pick something up and throw it, you know.
Yeah.
But in finishing out here, I know we got to run. You got to pick up your daughter. What's your favorite event or lift in the strongman, and what's your least favorite, and why?
So I it's funny. That's an extremely common question when you're talking to strongman, and I'm laughing because really, and I know that you're not asking it this way, but it's a very coded question because really what people are, or how people answer that is, they tell you the event that they're best at, which is their favorite event, and the event that they're not very good at is their least favorite event, right? So yeah. I wouldn't say that's the case for me. Even though deadlift is technically like placing wise is my worst event, I don't hate it. I would say my least favorite event or any kind of like front hold. Sometimes you have to like hold something here or hold something out to the side. Just find those I find those a little boring, candidly. So they're my least favorite event, just because, like I said, they're kind of boring to train for. They're boring to watch. I've done contests before where like the crowd is super into it, and then all of a sudden we get to that event and it's just kind of like, right? And then maybe towards the end, if somebody's like struggling a little bit, the crowd will cheer, but it doesn't get that same kind of reaction out of the crowd. Now, favorite events, God, there's so many that I really enjoy. Atlas stones, I think, are fun. Again, partially because I'm good at it, but partially because I like stone lifting or that stone lifting culture, because if you think about it throughout time, right, like it's very feasible that 1,000 years ago, people were out there saying, I bet I can pick this up and you can't. Or it was a test of, right, like I know in a lot of cultures, right, in Scotland and Iceland, for example, they actually have 4 stones that are, I don't know if you ever watched any of the documentaries on this, but there's 4 stones that are near the water, and in order to be able to work on the boat to earn a wage for your family, you had to be able to lift, I believe it was the second or the third largest of the 4 stones, because they needed to know you were strong enough to be able to work on the boat, right? So that goes back hundreds of years, probably longer than that, to be honest with you. So stone lifting culture has always been kind of a fun, fascinating thing that I think, like I said, connects us to our ancestors, and people have been doing that for who knows how long.
Did you have a documentary recommendation? I'm always looking for motivational content.
Yeah, Stoneland, and I believe the other one is called Full Styrker. I can send it to you offline as well, but those are 2 that come to the top of my head. Yeah, I
love that. I was going to say too, like I thought the stones, because I had seen you do like. I was going to ask you too, like I don't see you posting enough videos. I want to see more. I want to see more of the training videos, Ed. But I had seen you post the stone stuff, and again, just like to be as tall as you are, and again, like what people don't realize with the stone lifting is to properly do it, you've got to round your spine.
Yeah,
it's the only way you can do it to grab that stone. So you have to put your spine in it's technically its worst shape, but then learn how to develop enough strength around the spine to do it properly. Because again, like there's no leverage. You literally have to wrap your body around it. So, but it's ancient. It's ancient lifting. Like to me, it's like like you said, you can keep putting plates on, and like at some point, like the plates just get thinner, and like it's like on the internet, 135 and 315 look the same from the side, right?
Totally.
But you're lifting up stones. It just I get it. Like that to me is like some of the coolest stuff I've seen. I've got I had a 100-pound Atlas ball from Dynamax.
Yeah.
That I enjoy. I have a 50 now. I'm actually sitting on the 50. I do so much with this 50-pound med ball. But yeah, man, to pick it up, to get low and then round out, like, I mean, it's a dangerous game unless you get, again, like this is for trained professionals.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's weird. It is both, like you said, it's probably the one time, it's the one rule break where you're like, no, I actually want you to round your back, right? But
Yep.
again, there's a proper technique, but learning all that, like learning how to pick it up properly with all that, when teaching somebody that, before we even get into that, we'll talk about breathing, bracing, right? Like how to engage certain muscles, making sure, all right, from this point, what are we actually driving with? We're not trying to extend our spine at this point. We're actually trying to move about the hips, right? So that the spine stays locked in for as long as possible, right? To, again, minimize, you can't ever bring it down to zero, but to try to minimize risk as much as possible.
I love that. In closing here, let us know where people can learn more about you, your business, your gym. And I'd also like you to share some thoughts. You know, we talked about earlier the vacuum within the industry itself of just like trainers that had successful gyms are like gone. They're doing something else. We've also had this vacuum in motivation. A lot of people that were into a fitness routine, and just their world got rocked during the pandemic. And then obviously it's not like it's gotten any better. You know, people are not doing well in terms of, you know, financially and just spiritually in some ways. What would you tell people that are in that state of just like this post-pandemic purgatory, looking, maybe not even looking yet, but maybe you can give them that lightning strike moment of like, okay, you know, why fitness is so important to you, and why they need to find a way to get active in some way. In terms of just what it's done for you, what it's done with the people you've worked with.
Yeah, for sure. I would say kind of I have a twofold answer to that. One, similar to the situation I was in, right? You may find yourself in a rut and you're like, why am I training just to train? I would tell people, go out and, like, if there's something you want to work towards, like having a specific goal, it may be a competition. It may not be at all, right? Like, we've highlighted a lot of, like I said, strength sports, so strongman, powerlifting. We have plenty of people here that, like, their goal is to hike every 4,000 foot peak here in New England, right? So I've trained people for that. We have people that are getting ready for their first 5K, everything in between, right? So it doesn't have to be strength sports. If it's something you're like, I've always wanted to do that, right? Like, find some goal, something that says, all right, on this date, you know, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, I know I need to be ready. And that's going to help keep you wanting to go, right? Versus kind of like, well, I guess, all right, I know I'm supposed to do this, so I help my mortality rate, but it's really not that fun, right? If you find something, some aspect of it, right, like that you really enjoy about it, it will make all those difficult training sessions, the difficult days, and the days you have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, or the days you have to train at 9 o'clock at night, a little easier if you have a goal that you're working towards, right? And a specific goal of, all right, I want to accomplish this on this day, right? Just versus just kind of like, all right, well, I know I'm generally healthier than I was yesterday. So that's a big, I think for a lot of people, a big aspect of it. And I've had plenty of people that have started in strongman and they're like, I don't know if this sport's for me. I'm like, okay, I don't ever talk somebody into staying into it, right? If your heart's not into it, it's too damn hard to do the sport, and in any sport, right? Like, if you're not into it. So I've had people who are like, I think I'm going to go start running. Awesome. Let's start training for that. And if, you know, at a certain point you want to get down even further, like, I'm not a running coach. Let's find you somebody who works on technique, who works on that kind of stuff. And I want to see people chase after what they really want to chase after. Maybe that's, like I said, maybe that's running, maybe that's lifting, maybe that's doing something else completely different. But having something like that, a goal that you're working towards, I think helps tremendously. Yeah.
And then your social media, your websites, where can we learn more about the man, the myth, the legend, Eric Ed Dawson?
Sure. So social media on Facebook and Instagram, it's just at Titan Barbell, all one word, straight through. Website is titanbarbell.net. I also have my own. I generally don't put up a lot of my own training on the Titan site. I wanted to just kind of be about the gym and the community. My own personal Instagram is Cookie Monster Strongman. That's where I'll put up some of my own lifts as well.
That maybe that's why, because I couldn't find you. I searched Ed Dawson or Eric Dawson on Instagram, and then the only time I saw you was Rogue Fitness posted you doing. It was like this. It was like an impossible thing to grab, like without weights, and then it was 250 pounds. Yeah, like it's not. It doesn't look as impressive as it is to the naked eye. Was that a recent event you did?
That was a couple of years ago. That's a whole separate thing that I've kind of got into the last few years. Grip sport, or sometimes it's called arm lifting, which is kind of a funky name, but I think it's translated. I think the translation is from Russian, so I think that's why it's kind of a weird name. But it's basically all stuff that's, as the name would suggest, grip intensive. So the one thing that you're specifically referring to is anvil lift. So if you imagine what a classic anvil looks like, it's tipped on its side, so the horn is facing up. You have to grab that and lift it up. And as you know, right, like it comes down to a point, so it makes it a lot more challenging to squeeze and hold on to that point. This one wasn't an actual anvil, but it was the horn basically that we had, that plates were loaded on top of that. And grip stuff, like you said, it's yes, 250 pounds with, a traditional deadlift or a squat may not, for some people be that much, but in the grip world, something like that is really big, right? Like the way I always try to describe grip is it's like a light switch, right? You can be fine. You're just like, all right, that was easy. And then you add 5 pounds and you're like, this thing is glued to the ground right now, right? So there's a lot more neurological recruitment that comes to grip as well.
The crazy thing, the neurological part too, it's oftentimes used as like a recovery assessor, right? Because and time of day, like I'll wake up in the morning sometimes and I can barely hang on the bar for 5 or 10 seconds. And then like there's sometimes at night, especially if I have an edible, I can go 3+ minutes hanging on the bar, so it's and everything in between. And if I'm really like didn't get enough sleep or I had a hard workout or a tough business day the day before, my grip sucks the next day. So if you notice that too, in terms of just like, it's like a true litmus test of like where you're at physically right now.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting. I don't have the studies off the top of my head, but I know that they've linked grip strength with mortality. Actually, they've done some studies with that. The better your grip is, the greater or the lower the risk of mortality, I could say. Right?
The three biggest indicators are like ability to balance on one leg, get up and down off the ground without assistance, and grip.
Yeah.
So isn't it crazy? Like you do all these things, but like that's why and I like the fact that you're going like specializing in the grip, because if you can't grip it, you can't lift it.
Yeah.
Finishing off here, what are your favorite? I'm assuming you do hangs, which is like hanging at 365 pounds is like the ultimate muscle building exercise. What are your top 5 gripping exercises to leave us with here?
That I would suggest people to do.
Yeah, I guess
or just some stuff that I've done or fun stuff I've done or competed in.
It could be a mix. Yeah. I mean, maybe like general grip, and then like a couple, like maybe 1 or 2 of like your favorite specialized that you're working for.
All right. So here's something that people can do. Very simple. Take 2 10-pound or 5-pound plates or 10-pound plates, put the numbers in the classic like weight plate, if you have access to that, where it's a smooth on one side, numbers on that. Put the numbers together so the 2 smooth sides are out. You're going to pinch that and, do a set in each hand and just go for a walk, go for a farmer's walk as long as you can. So that pinch is one style of grip that we test in. That's something that everybody pretty much has access to. If they're at a home gym or at a commercial gym, it doesn't have to be a specialty thing. The second thing is a double overhand. So like when you're deadlifting, stay double overhand as long as possible. If you want to train that specifically and not even work on the deadlift aspect of it, you can put the bar in a rack up at a height that you barely have to lift it and just hold for time on that. Not even needing a barbell or anything like that. Like you said, you already brought it up. Hangs off a pull-up bar are tremendous, right? Grip strength, shoulder health, all that stuff. Super, super awesome. One of the things I've done to kind of play around and just kind of like stupid human tricks, if you will, is I hung with one hand, and then with the other hand, I lifted a Thomas Inch dumbbell, which if you're not familiar with that, that's a 174 pound dumbbell that has a handle that's 2 3/8 inches thick. So I was actually able to hold that with one hand and then hang off a bar for about 3 seconds. Not that long, but still about 3 seconds with that.
What?
So
365, you had 175 on one arm?
Yeah.
Wow, man. Dude, you are, I mean, look, you are a true credit to work ethic, consistency, and obviously passion. Thank you for the tips today, man. You're always welcome. Anytime something big is coming up and you want to promote it, or maybe we can get, if we have you on again at some point, we'll talk about more like specific strength conditioning protocols. But this is a great intro, just getting my audience familiar with you. I can't recommend Ed highly enough. We're going to put all the links to what he's got going in show notes. I'm glad I found out about Cookie Monster. Because I'd love to see the lifts. Like, and one thing too, just I'm sure people tell you this, but people love to see the misses.
Yeah.
You know, like that's we always wait. Like I've been holding on stuff for years. It's not ready, but sometimes it's just good to show the work in progress. Because again, they expect things daily now, so you can't show PRs daily. So you got to show like the work in progress and stuff too. And that's just that's the social media princess here helping you out with a little tip.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I don't have too many misses. Not because I'm that good, but because just the way we set up my training, I try not to. I'm not going after something where like the risk of missing it is very high at all, right? Like I try to, yeah, right. I always try to describe it as, you know, like my training now specifically for competitions, like at my age, like it's like a rocket launch, right? You don't get to launch the rocket 5 times before the day, right? There's one day you're launching the rocket, right? So everything, you have to just trust your training and that process, and trust all the numbers and all the work you've put in, so that come that contest day or that rocket launch day, like, you know, it's going to go well.
100%. Yeah, no, I love that. And you're really of the mindset of the original legend, Milo of Crotona.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Man, he started with the calf and then ended up it being a bull, and he carried him every day, that progressive overload. And again, the planning. There's so much strategy and planning that has to come to peaking to an event. Any closing thoughts here? I know you got to run. Thanks again for your time. And any final words for us?
No, I would. Here's my final word. Enjoy what you do, right? I just made a post recently about, you know, speaking with people in this community, the strength community, where I enjoy what you do, right? If you don't do it, find something else that you do, right? Because you don't have to do this specific type of exercise. If you're like, I just don't like it, right? Take up cycling, right? You don't like cycling. Why is all your friends are cycling? Well, go take up weightlifting instead, vice versa. Just find something that you enjoy doing, so that way when you're going through those hard times or those days that are really challenging, it makes it a little easier.
And also understand too that there's plenty of things, I know you might know this too, or experiences you enjoy for a while or in the beginning or for a long time, and all of a sudden, you know, so you have to know when to shift. Not that you never go back to it, but a lot of that stuff you can also put in autopilot. Once it's in there, and then maybe that's something else that you pursue, makes you fall back in love with what you were originally getting after too. You never know. And that's an important thing to point out, man, because again, there's too many things that we have to do day in, day out that we don't want to do. And fitness is a luxury. And this is something that, like, we're lucky to even talk about pursuing. Other parts of the world, it's not even a concept. It's not even a thought process because of the demands of just getting by and surviving, because we're so blessed if you live in the States. As tough as times are, and as maybe not as good as it used to be, it's still, I mean, there's a lot, there's that phrase, first world problems. Like, if you're stuck in a fitness rut, that's a first world problem. We have to have that perspective too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And thank you, man. Guys, thanks for listening. A quick like, share, and subscribe means a lot. We gave you 75 minutes of our time. It takes you 1 second to take that tiny little finger and press the like button. And again, a review, if you're on iTunes and Spotify, it can be as simple as BJ Podcast Good. 3 words. I'm not asking for that much of your time. That takes 10 seconds, but it means a lot. And we'll be back with more episodes. Check out Ed online, and we'll get his website and other links too in the show notes. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Peace.